The air crackled with irony and tension. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a night where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle would be honored for their humanitarian work at the prestigious Project Healthy Minds Gala, an event that coincided with World Mental Health Day 2025. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Cameras were flashing, reporters were shouting their names, and all eyes were on the couple as they arrived hand in hand at the glittering venue in New York City. Yet beneath the glamour, something was brewing. An invisible storm that had nothing to do with charity or mental health awareness. Just hours before their red carpet appearance, an episode of South Park had aired that sent shockwaves through the internet. It wasn't the first time the animated series had taken aim at the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. 2 years earlier, the satirical show had sparked global conversation with its worldwide privacy tour episode, mocking the couple's repeated pleas for privacy while maintaining a public lifestyle filled with media deals and interviews. But this time, South Park went further. The new episode didn't just poke fun. It branded them as award chasers, portraying exaggerated cartoon versions of the pair attending endless galas, clutching trophies for vague achievements, and crying for sympathy every time the spotlight dimmed. The timing couldn't have been worse. The satire hit the airwaves just as Harry and Meghan were being celebrated in real life for their contributions to mental health advocacy. The contrast was painfully sharp, a cartoon ridiculing their fame-hungry image airing on the same day they were being hailed as global humanitarians. And the world noticed. Social media erupted within minutes. Clips of the episode flooded TikTok and X, formerly Twitter, where users debated whether South Park had gone too far or whether the royal couple had simply set themselves up for the ridicule. Some called it cruel. Others called it poetic justice. The meme machine churned at full speed, splicing real footage of the couple on red carpets with snippets from the show. From privacy tour to trophy hunt, one viral post read. The digital crowd was laughing, but inside the Sussex camp, it was no joke. Those close to the couple reportedly said the mood shifted instantly. Meghan, ever image-conscious, was said to be deeply embarrassed, while Harry, according to one insider, looked like he'd been punched. For them, the satire cut deep not just because of its mockery, but because it mirrored something they'd worked so hard to control: their public narrative. Every time they tried to reclaim their story, the media found a new way to twist it. And now, a cartoon had turned it into a global punchline. The irony was brutal. Here were two people being honored for championing mental health, yet at that very moment, they were privately unraveling under the weight of ridicule. It wasn't the headlines about their achievements that trended that night, but animated caricatures of them holding golden trophies and chanting, "We just want validation." The disconnect was glaring. The question hung heavy in the air. Could a single episode of television undo years of image building? Or did it merely expose the fragility of that image? The couple's publicists scrambled behind the scenes, issuing statements about staying focused on their mission and rising above negativity. But those words did little to silence the laughter echoing online. For viewers, the episode was classic South Park. Edgy, provocative, and fearless. For Harry and Meghan, it was something else entirely. A mirror they never wanted to look into. The couple had spent years positioning themselves as modern reformers of the monarchy, advocates for mental health, and voices of compassion. Yet the world seemed increasingly skeptical. The more they spoke about empathy, the more critics accused them of self-promotion. The more they emphasized their struggles, the more people rolled their eyes. South Park didn't invent that perception. It simply amplified it in the most savage way possible. By turning their brand of activism into a punchline, it forced audiences to ask uncomfortable questions. Was the couple genuinely devoted to their causes, or had they become addicted to the attention that came with them? Could two people so publicly committed to privacy truly crave obscurity? Or were they chasing validation disguised as virtue? These were the questions swirling in the public consciousness as the couple took their seats inside the gala hall. Cameras captured every twitch of their expressions, every forced smile. When Harry took the stage to deliver his speech on mental wellness, the applause was polite but restrained. Some guests whispered that his tone seemed unusually sharp, his posture tight. Meghan, sitting beside him, nodded dutifully, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a mix of anger and hurt that cameras couldn't quite disguise. Behind closed doors, the tension was said to be palpable. According to sources close to the event, Harry vented his frustration at their team for not shielding them from yet another media fiasco. Meghan reportedly expressed disbelief that people still didn't understand their sincerity. To them, this wasn't about satire. It was about being mocked for trying to do good. But to the rest of the world, it was entertainment, biting, funny, and uncomfortably accurate. That duality, between how they saw themselves and how others saw them, had defined Harry and Meghan's public life since leaving the royal family. To their supporters, they were brave truth-tellers who broke free from an outdated institution. To their critics, they were self-absorbed opportunists who turned victimhood into a career. The South Park episode didn't create that divide. It spotlighted it in a way no press release could fix. And therein lies the genius and cruelty of satire. It doesn't just mock. It exposes. It distills public sentiment into exaggerated truth until laughter becomes a form of judgment. South Park didn't need to name names or quote facts. It simply held up a mirror, and the reflection was enough to make millions laugh and two people squirm. As the night wore on, Meghan's public grace contrasted sharply with her private frustration. She smiled for the cameras, shook hands, and delivered her carefully crafted remarks about compassion and awareness. But those who observed closely noticed the tension in her jaw, the way her gaze hardened whenever a question about the show was mentioned. Harry, too, seemed distracted, his usual composure fraying at the edges. By the time the gala concluded, the headlines were split in two. Half celebrated the couple's humanitarian recognition. The other half mocked their apparent inability to take a joke. Award chasers or change makers? One outlet wrote. South Park says it out loud. Another teased. It was the perfect storm. Celebrity, satire, and scandal. And Harry and Meghan were once again at its center. But beneath the chaos, something more complex was unfolding. The incident wasn't just about mockery. It was about power, the power of image, of narrative, of perception. It raised a haunting question that hovered over every camera flash and viral post. Could a royal couple who once controlled the world's sympathy still control their story? Or had they become prisoners of the very fame they sought to redefine? The introduction to the story doesn't end with laughter or applause. It ends with unease. Because what began as a comedy sketch had become something far more revealing. A cultural moment that blurred the line between ridicule and reality. And as the world laughed, Harry and Meghan faced a truth far harder to digest. In the modern age, reputation isn't built by royal titles or awards. It's built, and sometimes destroyed, in the court of public opinion, one meme at a time. That night, as the lights dimmed and the couple left the gala, the cameras followed them into the dark New York streets. They walked in silence, their smiles fading, their minds spinning. Somewhere, the South Park episode played again on screens across the world, the animated versions of themselves waving trophies in the air. And for the first time in a long while, the joke didn't feel funny. It felt personal. The story was no longer about an episode of television. It was about the cost of visibility, the fragility of image, and the impossible balancing act between sincerity and spectacle. What happens when the message gets lost in the noise? When every act of goodwill becomes fuel for ridicule? That's the question this story seeks to answer. And as we dig deeper, it becomes clear. This wasn't just a TV joke. It was a turning point. The moment the credits rolled on South Park's new episode, chaos followed like wildfire. The internet didn't just react, it exploded. Within minutes, hashtags mocking the Duke and Duchess were trending worldwide. Clips from the episode, stitched with real footage of Harry and Meghan at previous award events, flooded social feeds. The satirical portrayal of the royal couple wasn't subtle this time. It was loud, biting, and deliberately timed to sting. The episode opened with animated versions of Harry and Meghan stepping onto a red carpet, their cartoon selves clutching gold trophies while paparazzi shouted questions like, "What are you being honored for this time?" The Meghan caricature, with exaggerated gestures and wide eyes, replied, "For being us, Obviously, the hairy figure nodded, adding, "And for caring about everything." The audience inside South Park's fictional world roared with laughter, and so did viewers in real life. It wasn't lost on anyone that this new episode landed on the same week Harry and Meghan were due to attend one of their biggest public events of the year, the Project Healthy Minds Gala. The coincidence was too sharp to be accidental. Or was it? Some believe Trey Parker and Matt Stone, South Park's creators, had once again seized the perfect cultural moment to make their point. Others speculated that the timing was nothing more than pure chance, albeit cruelly poetic. But what mattered most was perception, and perception doesn't care about coincidence. It cares about narrative, and this narrative wrote itself. The same couple who had built their reputation on compassion and social awareness were now mocked as fame-hungry and self-congratulatory. Entertainment outlets picked up the connection immediately. Headlines screamed with precision-tuned irony, "South Park strikes again. Royals of attention seek validation." Another article from a major digital platform read, "As Harry and Meghan accept humanitarian honors, South Park honors them too with mockery." The duality was mesmerizing. In one world, the couple stood under chandeliers and applause, celebrated for their advocacy. In another, their cartoon doppelgangers stumbled through animated spotlights, desperate for approval. The overlap was cinematic. For fans of the show, this was quintessential South Park, a masterclass in cultural timing. But for Harry and Meghan, it felt like déjà vu, a nightmare revisited. They had weathered the storm of the first worldwide privacy tour episode in 2023, which mocked their decision to step back from royal life while simultaneously seeking global exposure. That earlier episode had stung deeply. Reports at the time claimed Meghan had considered legal action, though nothing materialized. The couple had chosen silence, perhaps hoping the ridicule would fade. Didn't. It lingered in memes, jokes, and endless online commentary that reshaped how the world viewed them. And now, 2 years later, it was happening again. Only this time it hit harder. The choice of theme, award chasers, was surgical. South Park had tapped into one of the most sensitive points of criticism surrounding the couple: their perceived obsession with accolades. Since leaving the royal family, Harry and Meghan had accumulated a collection of awards from organizations honoring their charity work, humanitarian efforts, and social advocacy. On paper, the recognition seemed deserved. But in public perception, the frequency of their appearances at galas, the red carpet photos, and the well-curated acceptance speeches painted another picture, one of two people constantly in the spotlight, basking in their own relevance. South Park's parody captured that tension perfectly. In one scene, the animated Meghan and Harry accept a World Compassion Award, only for the announcer to interrupt and say, "Actually, this one's just for showing up." The joke landed because it echoed a real criticism, that their presence often overshadowed the causes they supported. The writers weren't just mocking, they were diagnosing a cultural fatigue. The fallout was immediate. Media analysts dissected every frame, social commentators debated the ethics of ridicule, and royal watchers compared it to the monarchy's own crises. Some argued the satire was unfair, pointing out that many public figures attend similar events without backlash. Others said the difference was self-inflicted, that Harry and Meghan had blurred the line between activism and performance. The episode didn't invent that narrative. It merely amplified what people already whispered. But what made the timing even more explosive was how it intersected with the couple's real-world schedule. The Project Healthy Minds Gala wasn't just another charity event. It was a significant moment tied to a cause close to Harry's heart: mental health awareness. The irony of being publicly mocked for attention-seeking while advocating for mental health wasn't lost on anyone. The contradiction became the headline. Commentators online asked whether the couple could still authentically speak about resilience while appearing visibly rattled by a cartoon. Others defended them, pointing out the cruelty of ridiculing people for doing good. Yet, as the noise grew, sympathy became scarce. The entertainment world thrived on the clash. Late-night hosts used the controversy for punchlines. One quipped, "South Park gave them an award for being offended, and they didn't show up to accept it." Even serious talk shows debated the line between humor and harassment. And once again, Harry and Meghan were caught in the strange limbo between victimhood and spectacle, where sincerity collided with skepticism. To understand why this particular satire resonated so strongly, it helps to look at the broader cultural climate. The world in 2025 is hyper-aware of image manipulation. People have grown cynical about celebrity virtue, especially when it's packaged for public consumption. In that sense, Harry and Meghan have become symbols of modern contradiction. People who denounce media intrusion while relying on visibility to sustain influence. South Park, ever attuned to hypocrisy, didn't need to exaggerate much. It simply presented their contradictions in cartoon form. Inside media circles, there were whispers that the showrunners had intentionally aligned the episode's release with the gala's publicity window. While no evidence proved coordination, the coincidence served as marketing gold. Viewership for the episode skyrocketed, and clips racked up millions of views overnight. In contrast, footage of the gala struggled to compete. The internet's attention span had made its choice. Satire trumped sincerity. This wasn't just a PR setback. It was a cultural verdict. The couple's humanitarian achievements were drowned out by digital laughter. Their words about empathy and awareness couldn't compete with the simplicity of mockery. It was a painful reminder that in the age of viral content, narrative control doesn't belong to the subject. It belongs to the audience. And that realization was perhaps the most devastating blow. Because despite the glamour of their evening appearance, despite the trophies and speeches, Harry and Meghan couldn't escape the shadow of South Park's caricature. The show had, once again, done what few institutions could, reduced royal prestige to absurdity. Yet the story didn't end there. As journalists and fans argued about intent and fairness, whispers began to surface about what was happening behind palace walls. And even more intriguingly, behind the Sussexes' own doors. Rumors swirled that Meghan had privately called the episode cruel and deliberate. Harry, insiders claimed, had urged her to ignore it, but his frustration was visible in his tightening expression at the gala. Behind every red carpet smile was a flash of disillusionment. The exhaustion of a man realizing that no matter how noble his intentions, the world still saw him as a punchline. That's where this chapter ends, on the edge of irony and exposure. The satire had done more than entertain. It had reopened wounds. But as the laughter faded into headlines and the applause at the gala began to die down, one question loomed larger than all the others. What happens when parody starts to feel like prophecy? When the lights dimmed at Spring Studios that night, the air inside buzzed with a mix of anticipation and unease. The Project Healthy Minds Gala was one of New York's most elite events, a celebration of innovation, philanthropy, and mental health advocacy that had drawn global leaders, entertainers, and royals alike. The timing couldn't have been more poignant. It was World Mental Health Day 2025, a day meant to highlight empathy and resilience. Yet, for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, empathy was in short supply. Just hours earlier, they had become the unwilling stars of South Park's latest satirical strike, and the echo of that mockery was following them through every camera flash and whisper in the room. Reporters outside the venue shouted questions that had nothing to do with the gala's cause. Harry, did you see the South Park episode? Meghan, any comment on being called award chasers? Their publicist, ever composed, ushered them along with the practiced poise of someone accustomed to crisis control. But anyone watching closely could see it. The stiffness in Harry's jaw, the deliberate calm in Meghan's stride, the heavy silence between them. The couple's night of recognition was now shadowed by a cultural storm, and the irony was almost cruel. Inside, the hall glittered with precision. Tables draped in ivory linen, glasses of champagne catching the light, the hum of polite conversation blending with jazz music. On stage, the gala's organizers spoke passionately about mental health advocacy, emphasizing courage and vulnerability, words that should have resonated deeply with the Sussexes. Instead, they landed awkwardly. Every line about public scrutiny and self-care seemed to double as an echo of their own turmoil. When Harry and Meghan finally took their seats, the cameras zoomed in, projecting their faces onto the large screens around the room. Applause followed, polite, obligatory, and slightly strained. This wasn't the first time the couple had faced awkward applause. But it felt different now. For years, Harry and Meghan had carefully built a brand rooted in compassion, authenticity, and purpose. They were no longer just royal figures, they were global advocates for mental health, equality, and kindness. Yet, the more they tried to shed light on serious issues, the more critics accused them of self-promotion. The South Park episode had taken that skepticism and condensed it into something raw and funny. Too funny. It didn't just mock their activism. It questioned their sincerity. And that question hung invisibly over every compliment and camera click that night. The timing of the episode's release couldn't be ignored. Analysts in the entertainment industry speculated that it was deliberate, a calculated creative strike that capitalized on the couple's public schedule. South Park had always been bold with its timing, often releasing episodes that mirrored real-world events almost to the day. For Harry and Meghan, that meant their humanitarian recognition and their public humiliation arrived on the same evening. The contrast made the satire even sharper. As the evening progressed, whispers spread among attendees. Influencers and journalists, seated just a few tables away, exchanged glances and half-suppressed smiles. Some were already scrolling through their phones, checking the flood of memes circulating online. Screens glowed under the tables, short clips of the animated award-chasing royals, followed by real photos of the couple smiling for the gala photographers. The overlap was too perfect, too easy to share. The internet had no mercy. The couple's public image had always been a balancing act, regal yet relatable, private yet outspoken. That delicate equation was now unraveling. South Park's caricature had stripped away the carefully curated polish and replaced it with something that felt uncomfortably close to reality. Two public figures seemingly addicted to the limelight. What made the parody so piercing was that it didn't invent new flaws. It exaggerated existing ones. The writers had studied their interviews, speeches, and appearances, then boiled them down into a single cutting premise, that Harry and Meghan wanted to be celebrated not for what they did, but for who they were. As Meghan took the stage to present an award later that evening, her smile was unwavering, but her eyes betrayed fatigue. Her speech, typically poised and warm, carried a sharper edge this time. She spoke about the importance of compassion in an age of cynicism, about how laughter can sometimes conceal cruelty. It was subtle, but anyone who'd seen the South Park episode knew exactly what she was referring to. The crowd clapped politely, though not everyone met her gaze. Harry followed with his own remarks about mental resilience, focusing on how humor can heal but also harm. His tone was calm, almost academic, yet beneath it was the unmistakable frustration of someone tired of being misunderstood. He spoke of empathy not as a virtue but as a necessity, a line that drew faint applause. The irony hung in the air like static. The world had once adored his vulnerability, but now it questioned his motives. Outside the event, coverage was split. Major outlets like The Guardian and Vanity Fair praised the couple's grace under fire, highlighting their continued advocacy despite mockery from popular culture. Others, like the New York Post and Daily Mail, focused on the tension. South Park jabs leave Sussexes silent. One headline read, "Harry's tight smile says it all," said another. The story wasn't about mental health anymore. It was about damage control. And damage control, for Harry and Meghan, had become a recurring theme. Every time they tried to take control of their narrative, something else, an interview, a documentary, a statement, pulled it out of their hands. Now even an animated show had joined the chorus. The tragedy was that their message still mattered. The gala's focus on mental wellness was a cause Harry had championed long before leaving royal life. Yet no one was talking about that anymore. All the attention, once again, was on them, not their cause. Critics online pointed out that this was the very dynamic South Park had mocked. The couple's tendency to become the center of every story, even when the topic was bigger than them. Their sincerity, some argued, was drowned by their visibility. And that observation struck at the heart of the problem. How do you advocate for attention to a cause without appearing to seek attention for yourself? That paradox had haunted Harry and Meghan since they stepped into the spotlight as independent figures. They were no longer shielded by palace protocol, no longer controlled by royal press offices. They had freedom, but freedom came with exposure. Every speech, every appearance, every expression was dissected. The South Park episode simply packaged that dissection into laughter. As the evening drew to a close, the couple left the venue amid a flurry of flashbulbs. Reporters continued to shout questions about the episode. Meghan kept her head high, offering a small wave. Harry muttered a brief "thank you" before they disappeared into their car. But inside, the silence between them was telling. What was supposed to be a night of validation had turned into another lesson in public perception. A reminder that in the modern world, image is currency, and control over it is fleeting. Back in Los Angeles, their team was already working late. Strategies were being drafted, statements prepared. Should they ignore the mockery again? Or was it time to respond, subtly, gracefully, but firmly? They knew any reaction could backfire, yet doing nothing risked letting the narrative spiral. The couple's dilemma was familiar. Silence meant weakness. Defense meant vanity. As social media continued to buzz, a single comment under a viral video captured the sentiment of the night. South Park didn't ruin their reputation, it read. It just reflected what people already thought. That more than the jokes or the timing was the true blow. The satire hadn't created a perception problem. It had exposed it. And as Harry and Meghan's motorcade disappeared into the night, one thing was clear. This was no longer about humor or even controversy. It was about identity. How do two people who built their brand on compassion reclaim it when the world insists on laughing? Behind the velvet curtain of glamour and applause, the atmosphere was far from celebratory. Once the Project Healthy Minds gala ended and the crowd began to disperse, a tense quiet settled over the room where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle waited with their close aides. Cameras were still flashing outside, but inside the private lounge reserved for award recipients, the mood had changed dramatically. What had started as a night of honor had devolved into a public relations nightmare. The South Park episode had seeped into every conversation, every tweet, every whispered comment between journalists and guests. For the Sussexes, it felt as though their most personal insecurities had been turned into a global joke. Harry sat rigidly on one of the white leather couches, staring at his phone. Notifications flooded the screen, mentions, tags, alerts. Every time he scrolled, another clip or meme appeared, mocking his speech, Meghan's smile, their synchronized gestures on stage. "Look at this," he muttered to one of his aides, his voice low and tight. The aide leaned over but didn't speak. Meghan, standing by the full-length mirror, didn't look up. She adjusted her earrings, her reflection flawless, her composure cracking. "It's the same thing all over again," she said quietly. "Every time we take a step forward, someone drags us 2 steps back." The aides exchanged glances. They had seen this before, the emotional whiplash of public adoration followed by ridicule. For Meghan, image wasn't just vanity. It was armor. Every outfit, every gesture, every quote was calibrated to reinforce authenticity. But tonight, that armor felt dented. The satire had done more than mock her. It had undermined the very narrative she and Harry had fought to build. One of resilience, empathy, and purpose. The cartoon's simplicity was its cruelty. It reduced years of advocacy into a punchline. Harry threw his phone down, his frustration simmering. "They don't even watch the full speeches," he said. "They just clip the jokes, twist the message, and call it truth." One of his team members tried to interject, suggesting that staying quiet might be wiser. But Meghan turned sharply. "No," she said. "That's what they expect, silence. We let them define us, and then everyone laughs while we sit here pretending it doesn't hurt." Her voice cracked slightly, the anger covering something deeper, exhaustion. Outside the room, event staff whispered among themselves. Some had seen the couple's arrival and sensed the tension immediately. They were both smiling for the cameras, but you could feel it, one staffer later told a journalist. It was like watching two people trying not to fall apart in real time. That description would resurface days later in online articles dissecting their reaction. It was the perfect contrast, the couple being honored for advocating mental health awareness, while simultaneously being mocked for perceived vanity. The internet couldn't resist the irony. Meanwhile, the royal commentary world was ablaze. Palace watchers back in London were already feeding quotes to tabloids. Anonymous insiders claimed that Prince William had privately found the South Park mockery predictable, and that the palace was not surprised by the public reaction. Whether true or not, the comments added fuel to the fire. It painted a picture of isolation. Harry and Meghan on one side, the rest of the royal family watching quietly from afar, perhaps even smugly. The next morning, newspapers and digital outlets carried dual headlines. One half praised the couple's speeches about compassion and mental wellness. The other half mocked their reaction to South Park's brutal takedown. The contrast was dizzying. CNN discussed the irony of being mocked on the same day as a mental health event, while entertainment blogs called it the most uncomfortable gala of the year. On talk shows, comedians joked about the couple's award addiction, echoing South Park's message almost word for word. The satire had leapt off the screen and merged seamlessly into real commentary. In Montecito, the couple's communications team was scrambling. Emails flew between their PR advisors in Los Angeles and London. Damage control strategies were drawn up with precision. Option 1. Ignore it completely, maintaining dignity through silence. Option 2. Issue a subtle but firm statement about the importance of empathy and restraint in humor. Option 3. Let their allies in media do the talking, a favorite tactic allowing others to defend them while keeping their hands clean. But Meghan wasn't convinced any of it would work. "They've already decided who we are," she told one of her staff. "No statement will change that." Harry, pacing near the window, was quieter. He'd lived through public mockery before, tabloid scandals, royal gossip, ridicule in the British press. But this felt different. South Park wasn't a tabloid. It was cultural commentary, a mirror of public sentiment. "When the jokes sound like headlines," he said to Meghan that morning, "you realize people aren't laughing at the show. They're laughing at us." Their private tension spilled into their public appearances over the next few days. Observers noted a distance between them at smaller events. Meghan's smile seemed forced. Harry appeared distracted. Online, analysts dissected every clip, calling it strained, awkward, cold. Each new interpretation reinforced the parody that had started it all, the image of two people trapped in their own performance. But what hurt the most wasn't the mockery itself. It was the way the world seemed eager to believe it. The couple's sincerity, once their greatest strength, had become a liability. Their transparency was now seen as overexposure. Their activism was labeled opportunism. South Park hadn't just mocked them, it had validated public skepticism. Every laugh at the cartoon was another crack in their credibility. Backstage reports from the gala began surfacing online within days. Anonymous sources described Harry as visibly upset and Meghan as struggling to hold back tears. Whether those accounts were exaggerated didn't matter. They became part of the story. Every leak, every rumor, every blurry photo reinforced a single idea: that the glamorous image of the Sussexes was crumbling under pressure. Meanwhile, fans of the couple, the devoted base that had defended them through every controversy, fought back online. Hashtags like #StandWithHarry and Meghan and #SatireIsNotEmpathy trended briefly, with supporters accusing the show of bullying under the guise of humor. Others pointed out the hypocrisy of mocking advocates for mental health on World Mental Health Day. But the defense couldn't match the speed of ridicule. For every sympathetic post, there were 10 mocking replies. The internet was ruthless. In the midst of it all, the creators of South Park remained silent, as they always did. Their lack of response made the satire feel even more powerful. They didn't need to clarify intent. The laughter was enough. The couple, meanwhile, were trapped between pride and pain, torn between ignoring the noise and feeling erased by it. As the week wore on, one thing became clear. The South Park episode had shifted something in the public narrative. Harry and Meghan were no longer seen simply as outspoken royals. They had become case studies in the dangers of overexposure. Their every move was now filtered through cynicism. The more they tried to prove their sincerity, the more people saw performance. Late one evening, Harry reportedly told a confidant that he missed anonymity, the days when people's opinions didn't feel like verdicts. "We wanted freedom," he said quietly, but freedom came with an audience. It was an admission that cut to the heart of their story, the trade-off between autonomy and public judgment. Meghan, however, wasn't ready to retreat. In her mind, every attack only strengthened her resolve. "They can laugh now," she told her team during one late-night call, "but they won't laugh forever. The truth lasts longer than the joke." Her tone was calm, but her expression betrayed fatigue, the toll of constantly having to fight for legitimacy. That night, as the couple prepared to return home, a photographer captured them leaving through a back exit. The photo showed Meghan looking downward, Harry glancing toward her with concern. The caption on social media read, "The humanitarians of the year leave in silence." It went viral instantly. Silence had become their only defense, and their greatest vulnerability. By dawn, the headlines were everywhere. Television networks replayed clips from the South Park episode alongside footage from the gala, cutting between the animated parodies and the real-life smiles that now looked painfully forced. The juxtaposition was merciless. News anchors spoke in measured tones, calling it a cultural collision between celebrity activism and satire. On social media, no one was measured. There, it was open season. Comments ranged from laughter to outrage, with memes labeling the couple the world's most decorated victims. In Montecito, the Sussexes' home was unusually quiet. The blinds were drawn, the phones on silent. Harry sat by the kitchen counter, staring into his coffee, while Meghan scrolled endlessly on her tablet. Every swipe brought another headline. "South Park strikes again. The Sussexes mocked as attention addicts." Another read, "Even cartoons can't resist the drama." The humor was everywhere, but to them, there was nothing funny about it. It felt like a dismantling of credibility, of control, of identity. Their communications director, a seasoned strategist with years in Hollywood PR, had arrived early that morning. His tone was calm but urgent. "You're trending in 40 countries, he began. "But not for the reasons we want." He laid out a printed sheet with possible strategies, none of them ideal. Option 1 was silence, letting the story run its course. Option 2 involved a subtle counter-narrative, a public show of composure. Option 3 was riskier, addressing it head-on through a statement or interview. Harry immediately dismissed that idea. "That's what they want," he said. "A reaction. They feed off that." Meghan, however, wasn't convinced silence would help. "Silence lets them define the story," she replied. "We've seen what happens when we stay quiet. The vacuum fills with lies." Her words echoed through the kitchen, sharper than intended. Harry didn't respond right away. The divide between their instincts, his to retreat, hers to confront, had grown over the years. It was one of the unseen pressures of their new life. Outside, paparazzi had already begun to gather, camping at the end of their gated driveway. Drones hovered discreetly over the property, hoping for a glimpse. The couple's security team alerted them, but Harry barely reacted. He'd lived with that intrusion for most of his life. What gnawed at him wasn't the invasion. It was the loss of narrative. "It doesn't matter what we do," he finally said, breaking the silence. "They've made up their minds. The world loves the joke more than the truth." Meanwhile, the internet's obsession grew more layered. Analysts on YouTube and podcasts dissected the episode frame by frame. Commentators debated whether South Park had crossed a line or simply captured public fatigue. Some argued that Harry and Meghan were victims of a double standard, celebrated when they spoke about compassion, condemned when they did the same too often. Others said they were victims of their own strategy, mistaking media saturation for meaning. The debate wasn't about the show anymore. It was about what the couple represented, the tension between virtue and visibility in the age of endless attention. Amid the noise, one clip from the gala began to circulate. It showed Harry on stage, thanking the audience, while Meghan reached for his hand. For a split second, he hesitated before taking it. The gesture was small, fleeting, but the internet magnified it. Tension between the Sussexes? Read one headline. Even the body language tells a story. The video racked up millions of views in hours. It didn't matter that Harry's hesitation might have been nerves or distraction. Perception had already transformed it into symbolism. Their critics found new energy. South Park wasn't satire. One commentator tweeted, "It was a documentary." The line went viral. Late-night hosts picked it up. The next evening, it was quoted on multiple talk shows. Each time, the laughter grew. Inside their home, the mood was heavier. Meghan sat with her team, going through emails from supporters and foundations who had reached out privately. Some messages were kind, expressions of solidarity from friends, mental health advocates, and a few Hollywood allies. But others were cautious, diplomatic, avoiding direct association with the controversy. "You can always tell who's waiting to see which way the wind blows," Meghan said quietly. Harry's phone buzzed again. A message from an old military friend who'd seen the episode. It read simply, "You'll laugh about it one day." Harry didn't respond. He wasn't sure he ever would. To him, this wasn't just ridicule. It was erosion, the slow chipping away of sincerity. The cartoon had turned everything serious into spectacle, and the world was applauding. By afternoon, the Palace in London released a short, predictable statement when pressed for comment. The royal family does not comment on satirical or entertainment material. It was sterile, detached, but its subtext was clear. They were staying above it. That neutrality made Harry's isolation feel sharper. The institution he'd walked away from was untouchable. He and Meghan were not. By midweek, they convened another meeting with their core team. The goal? Reframe the story before it's cemented into public memory. The meeting was tense from the start. Their communications director began with a reality check. "We're not in a scandal," he said evenly. "We're in a perception trap. The more we fight it, the bigger it gets." He presented metrics showing how each online response or indirect comment about the episode only reignited interest. "The data's clear. Every time we mention it, even positively, engagement spikes but sentiment drops." Meghan exhaled sharply. "So we just let them laugh?" she asked. "Pretend it didn't happen while they turn us into a meme again?" Her frustration was visible, but underneath it was hurt. For her, the ridicule felt deeply personal. She had built her image around intellect, compassion, and precision. A woman who could command a room with grace. To be caricatured as vain and self-absorbed felt like a betrayal of everything she had tried to prove since leaving royal life. Harry's reaction was quieter but no less intense. "We can't win by talking," he said, leaning forward. "Every word we say gets twisted. Maybe the only way through this is to stop performing for them." Meghan turned to him, eyes sharp. "And what are we supposed to do, disappear?" His silence was answer enough. He wasn't suggesting withdrawal, just space. Something he'd been craving for months but had never managed to claim. The PR director cut in. "There's another option. We move the story. Shift the focus. You've got that mental health campaign launch next week. If we lean into that, the narrative can evolve." He outlined a plan. An emotional but restrained video message about resilience, filmed at their Montecito home, centered on the theme of public pressure and recovery. No mention of the satire, but enough sincerity to remind people of their humanity. Meghan nodded slowly. "Let's do it," she said. But as the plans took shape, another story began brewing in the media, one neither of them had anticipated. British tabloids were running reports claiming that palace insiders had found the South Park parody accurate and not unfair. The implication was devastating. It suggested that even those behind palace walls, including Harry's family, had privately laughed at their expense. Whether true or fabricated, it spread fast. Headlines framed it as a humiliation. Royals laugh along with South Park. One article read, "Even the firm finds it funny." That cut deeper than any cartoon could. For Harry, the notion that his family might have joined the laughter felt like betrayal layered upon old wounds. He distanced himself from royal life to protect his peace, but the shadow of that institution followed him everywhere. He paced the living room, his voice low but strained. "They'll never stop reminding me I left," he said. "Even when I do something good, it always comes back to Mockery." Meghan watched him for a moment, then walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "They want to see you break," she said. "That's their game." But even as she said it, her tone lacked conviction. It wasn't clear whether they referred to the media, the palace, or the public at large. Maybe all of them. The following morning, the couple's production team arrived to film the short message for their mental health initiative. The crew set up cameras in their garden. Simple lighting, no glamour, just natural tones. The idea was authenticity, the very quality that had once made the couple relatable. Harry spoke first, his voice steady but subdued. He talked about pressure, judgment, and the importance of self-worth in the face of public scrutiny. Meghan followed, focusing on compassion and resilience. There was no reference to the South Park debacle, but the subtext was obvious. It was a soft rebuttal, controlled, dignified, but tinged with vulnerability. When the video went live, it garnered millions of views within hours. Supporters praised their composure, calling it classy and graceful, but skeptics remained unmoved. "Damage control," one commentator sneered. "A PR patch over a bruised ego." Others mocked the serene tone of the video, editing it into montages with clips from the South Park episode. The internet, as always, had the final say. Days later, a new article appeared in the Times, arguing that the satire had marked a cultural turning point for the couple. The Sussex's power, it read, was once their story, but stories can't be owned forever, especially when the audience starts writing them instead. The words struck like a prophecy. Harry read the article quietly one night, then folded the paper and set it aside. Meghan asked what it said, but he just shook his head. "It's not worth it," he murmured. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, something else began to shift. Invitations that had once come freely, talk show appearances, endorsements, partnerships, now slowed. Not disappeared, but paused. The industry that had embraced them was watching, calculating. In a world built on perception, even allies were hesitant to attach themselves to what the public now treated as a punchline. For the first time since leaving royal life, Harry and Meghan found themselves navigating silence not as a choice, but as consequence. It was in that silence that the irony deepened. Their message about mental health, empathy, and resilience was more relevant than ever. But the louder they tried to share it, the less people wanted to listen. The South Park episode had crystallized a cynical truth. When public figures become symbols, their humanity becomes optional. The world no longer saw them as people, only characters in a never-ending drama, and characters can't control their scripts. Late one evening, as the day's last emails trickled in, Meghan sat alone in her office, the glow of her laptop lighting her face. She scrolled through comments beneath their latest post, some supportive, others vicious. "It's not them," one person wrote. "It's the idea of them that's exhausting." Meghan closed the screen and whispered, "Maybe that's the real problem. People don't see us anymore." Harry entered a moment later, sensing her unease. "Then maybe we stop trying to make them see," he said quietly. She looked at him, uncertain whether that was surrender or wisdom. Either way, it sounded like the beginning of something new, or perhaps the end of something they'd been clinging to for too long. The following week brought no relief, only a quieter, more unsettling form of pressure. The laughter had faded from headlines, replaced by analysis and commentary about what the South Park parody meant for the Sussexes' public trajectory. Journalists weren't just talking about one episode anymore. They were dissecting years of public behavior, searching for the moment when admiration turned to fatigue. The tone had shifted from mockery to assessment. Major outlets ran think pieces titled, "The Sussex Fatigue Phenomenon," and "When Empathy Turns into Exhaustion." One media analyst summed it up bluntly. The problem isn't that Harry and Meghan speak. It's that they never stop speaking. The observation echoed across talk shows, articles, and online forums. Suddenly, even some of their supporters began admitting, quietly, reluctantly, that the couple's message had started to feel repetitive. What had once been viewed as courageous transparency now risked being seen as endless justification. Inside their Montecito home, that realization hit harder than any joke or meme. Harry and Meghan had built their new lives on the premise of having a voice, on being able to tell their story without filters. Now, that very freedom seemed to be turning against them. Every word, every appearance, every new initiative was met with suspicion. The South Park episode hadn't just mocked them. It had framed them in a way the public found irresistible, as self-aware but tone-deaf, sincere but performative. The paradox stuck. Their PR team gathered again in what had become a near-daily ritual. The mood was heavier this time. "We can't outrun the narrative," one advisor said. "Every move we make confirms it." Meghan listened quietly, her arms folded, eyes fixed on the table. "So what's the alternative?" she asked. The room fell silent. No one wanted to say it, but everyone knew. The only way to regain authenticity was to disappear for a while. Harry broke the silence first. "You mean vanish?" he asked. The advisor nodded. A pause. "Let the noise burn itself out. If you keep feeding the cycle, it never ends." Meghan leaned back, thoughtful but resistant. "We've worked too hard to go silent again," she said. "Silence is what they used to control us before. I won't go back to that." But even she knew that constant visibility was eroding their credibility. Every public statement was treated like an audition. Every quiet moment was read as strategy. The couple had reached the paradox of modern fame, the point where sincerity couldn't exist without suspicion. And for the first time, Meghan looked uncertain about how to move forward. That night, they dined alone in their courtyard under soft lights. The world outside buzzed with opinions, but for a few hours they sat without speaking about it. Harry poured wine, Meghan picked at her food. "Do you ever wish we'd just stopped after the Netflix thing?" Harry asked. She hesitated before answering. "Sometimes. But if we'd stopped, they'd still find something. They always do." Her voice carried both resolve and resignation. The next morning, tabloids in London reported that sources close to the palace had described the couple's reaction to the South Park episode as overblown. The piece implied that royal aides found it telling how deeply the Sussexes had taken offense. The quote spread fast, reinforcing the idea that the couple lacked humor and perspective. To the public, it seemed like confirmation that Harry and Meghan could dish criticism but not take it. In reality, it wasn't humor they lacked. It was trust. They had been misquoted too many times. Their sincerity turned into spectacle. Meghan remarked privately that week, "It's not that I can't take a joke. It's that the world's been laughing at us for years, not with us." Meanwhile, Hollywood's response was cautious. Industry insiders, once vocal supporters, had gone quiet. Invitations to panels, charity events, and galas slowed. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle cooling. Behind closed doors, producers whispered that the couple had become too divisive. For celebrities, image was oxygen, and association could be costly. Meghan's team noticed the shift immediately. "They still respect you," her agent said delicately. "They're just waiting for the noise to settle." But the noise never really stopped. Online culture thrives on repetition, and South Park had provided endless material. Fans remixed old interviews, pairing them with clips from the episode. The line, "We just want validation," became a meme, plastered across TikTok with hundreds of variations. What made it worse was that the couple's own words, drawn from real speeches about self-worth, were being used as punchlines. It wasn't just mockery anymore, it was distortion. To their credit, Harry and Meghan carried on with their planned appearances. They attended a small roundtable on veterans' mental health that week. The event was private, with no cameras allowed. Those who attended described Harry as deeply engaged but subdued. "You could tell he was present," one participant later recalled. "But there was this heaviness in him, like he was trying to prove something invisible." Back home, Meghan focused on their next foundation project, reviewing proposals late into the night. Her drive had always been her coping mechanism. Yet this time, the motivation came from something deeper, maybe even defiance. She told her assistant during one long evening, "You can survive being hated. What you can't survive is being mocked for trying." Still, exhaustion lingered between them. Their relationship, usually a united front, was starting to show strain. Not because of resentment but fatigue. Every conversation circled back to reputation, strategy, perception. The intimacy that once came from shared purpose now felt burdened by it. By the end of the week, one of their closest allies, a media consultant who had been with them since their move to the US, decided to speak candidly. "You don't need to win the public back," she told them. "You need to stop chasing it. Let people miss you again." Her advice hit differently. It wasn't about image management anymore. It was about emotional survival. That night, Harry took a walk through their garden, the sound of distant waves faint in the air. He thought about everything they had tried to build, a new kind of life, a new kind of purpose, and how easily it had become parody. For a moment, he envied the anonymity he'd once despised. Meghan joined him outside, barefoot, her hair loose. "It feels like we're always starting over," she said softly. He looked at her, tired but resolute. "Then maybe starting over is the only way to keep going." It wasn't defiance. It was survival, the quiet decision to keep moving even when the laughter refused to die. The world had turned their sincerity into satire. But somewhere beneath the noise, they still believed their story wasn't over yet. The following days settled into a strange rhythm of public appearances and private reflection. Harry and Meghan were back in the public eye, attending a series of charitable events and foundation meetings, but the shadow of the South Park episode still lingered. Every handshake, every smile, every carefully measured comment felt under scrutiny. It was no longer just about perception, it was about control or the lack thereof. The more they tried to convey authenticity, the more the world questioned it. Every moment of sincerity was mirrored with skepticism online. During one afternoon press conference for a new mental health initiative, Meghan addressed the room with her usual poise. "Our goal is simple," she began, her voice clear and steady. "We want to make conversations about mental wellness easier, more open, and accessible." Applause followed, polite but measured. Reporters asked a few pointed questions, none about the satire, though everyone was thinking it. A small group of social media journalists pressed anyway. "Do you feel unfairly portrayed in popular culture?" Meghan's expression flickered briefly, a micro-reaction captured by dozens of cameras. She paused, considered, and replied with grace, "I'm focused on the people we serve, not the caricatures that exist online." Harry stood beside her, nodding, his own expression a mixture of weariness and determination. In a rare interview later, he described the surreal experience of being mocked while advocating for serious causes. "It's strange," he admitted, "to dedicate yourself to helping people with their struggles and then be reduced to a joke because of how you look or the way you smile." His words, though sincere, were interpreted differently by various media outlets. Some praised his honesty, others spun it as defensiveness. Behind the scenes, their team worked tirelessly to manage perception. Meetings stretched into the evenings, filled with discussions about strategy, messaging, and timing. Every statement was weighed for potential impact, every social media post analyzed for tone. Meghan occasionally expressed frustration. "We're not puppets," she said during one heated discussion. "Why does every action need an audience?" Harry agreed quietly, but he knew the world had no interest in silence. Silence, too, was scrutinized. The episode had inadvertently exposed an uncomfortable truth. In the age of instant media and viral content, a single joke could overshadow genuine work. Harry and Meghan had hoped that their advocacy and humanitarian projects would define their public persona, but the satire had crystallized a narrative that was difficult to counter. Their every move would now be seen through the lens of that caricature, a lens that emphasized attention-seeking over altruism. In private moments, they discussed the irony of the situation. Meghan reflected on the absurdity of being mocked for award-seeking while simultaneously dedicating themselves to causes that genuinely mattered. "It's almost funny if it weren't so exhausting," she said one evening, laughing faintly through a sigh. Harry nodded, recognizing the paradox. The world admired them and questioned them in equal measure, a tension that seemed unresolvable. Their friends and allies offered varying perspectives. Some urged them to ignore the criticism entirely, insisting that public mockery had always accompanied fame. Others recommended proactive engagement, carefully crafting narratives that highlighted their ongoing work without directly addressing the satire. Harry and Meghan weighed both approaches, realizing that any public response could either humanize them or further entrench the mockery. As the days passed, the couple found solace in their private routines. Walks along the California coastline, quiet dinners at home, and long conversations without media oversight became essential for emotional grounding. These moments offered a reprieve from the relentless scrutiny and reminded them of the work that truly mattered: supporting communities, advocating for mental health, and maintaining their own resilience. Despite the ongoing attention, Harry and Meghan remained committed to their initiatives. Fundraising events, workshops, and digital campaigns continued, often drawing praise from those directly benefiting from their programs. Yet the contrast between real-world impact and public perception remained stark. The South Park episode, while humorous to some, had inadvertently amplified the challenges of maintaining authenticity in a culture that prioritizes spectacle over substance. In interviews and private statements, they emphasized the importance of perseverance. "The work we do is bigger than the narratives created about us," Meghan said during a recorded session with their foundation team. "It's about the people, the communities, and the awareness we can generate." Harry added, "No amount of satire or mockery can erase that. It's not about us being perfect. It's about the change we can foster." Their approach gradually shifted toward long-term strategy, focusing less on immediate public reaction and more on sustainable impact. By concentrating on meaningful projects and genuine engagement, they aimed to reclaim a portion of their narrative. While the caricature from South Park would linger in popular consciousness, Harry and